Ladies and gentlemen, I want to preface this video with if you have a dysfunctional family or if you personally show signs of any of these characteristics, or if a family member shows them, or if a spouse has told you you might have them, please go to a therapist, go to family counseling. They're there to help you. I say that because, number one, I'm not the expert on a dysfunctional relationship with family members. It's an extremely complex situation that has a number of factors, and unless I talk to you personally, I'm not going to be able to give you accurate advice. I am here to give you a general understanding of a dysfunctional relationship with a family member and maybe some solutions based on my personal experience. A dysfunctional family is a family in which conflict, misbehavior, and often child neglect or abuse on the part of an individual parent or on a sibling can foster in this dynamic, making a strained, confusing, or even dangerous environment for children and parents, because actually there is a lot of instances, which I think is quite sad, of children, especially when they get older, attacking parents. I've seen it. I've witnessed that happen, and it's a scary thing. It really is. So please don't always blame the parents on a dysfunctional family dynamic. You don't know unless you are them or unless you've seen it. So a dysfunctional family, it could be usually, like for most of the time, it results of two adults, one over being abusive and the other being codependent, and it may affect the children in a number of ways, mental illness, and with this as well, the parents could also be mentally ill. They could be on drugs. They could be on, they could be alcoholics. There's a number of factors that go into this. Dysfunctional parents, so we're going to talk about parents right now, may, overcorrect from their own dysfunctional relationship with their parents. In some cases, the dominant parent will abuse or neglect their children, and the other parent, with not object misleading a child to assume blame. So you blame the child for what you're doing, for that parent, and that does happen. So common features. There are some common features of a dysfunctional family, and it tends to be reinforced, the dysfunctional behavior, either through enabling or participation. The family unit can be affected by a variety of factors. A lack of empathy, understanding, sensitivity towards certain family members, while expelling extreme empathy or care towards one of the family members who have real or perceived special needs, and I'm putting that in quotes. In other words, one family member continuously receives far more than they deserve, while another is mistreated. That happens, unfortunately, quite a bit. Denial. Refusing to acknowledge abusive behavior, possibly believing that the situation is normal or even beneficial, also known as the elephant in the room. Not having boundaries for self or others, tolerating inappropriate treatment of others, failing to express what is acceptable and unacceptable treatment, tolerating of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. So if a family member is seeing another parent, or seeing a parent abusing that person and not doing anything, I'm sorry, but that is a common dynamic in a dysfunctional relationship, because you put it in your mind that they either A, deserve it, or the boundaries do not, that are not to appropriate standards. Disrespect of others' boundaries. So, physical contact that another person dislikes. Breaking important promises without just cause, purposefully violating a boundary from another person that they have expressed, that kind of stuff. Extremes in conflict, either too much fighting or insignificant peaceful arguing between family members, unequal or unfair treatment of one or more family members due to their birth order, gender, age, family role, like a mother, abilities, race, caste, and, a bunch of other different things. So, or even sexual orientation, which is a huge one for this. So if your child comes out to be gay and you change the dynamic of it because you thought of them as, quote, normal, that's not right. If a birth order, which is once again another big one, where you treat a sibling, or if that parent treats a sibling better than their, counterpart, that is mistreatment. That is a dysfunctional family dynamic. Or especially with gender, this one is huge, enormously huge. And it's like, okay, well, especially in places like China, where they really put an emphasis on having a male to carry on the family name. That in itself is a cultural dysfunctional reality, which we might get into later, but this is for direct family members in a family unit. So not universal. So this does not mean that every family member has it, and some do and some don't, and there is a definite separation of those. Abnormally high levels of jealousy or other controlling behaviors. Conflict influenced by maternal status. So between separated or divorced parents, usually relating to or arising from their breakup. Conflict between parents who remain married, often for the perceived sake of their children, whose separation or divorce would in fact remove a detrimental influence of those children, or must be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, as a breakup may harm children for obvious reasons. And parents who wish to divorce but cannot due to financial, societal, including religious, or legal reasons. Now that one is an incredibly important aspect, because I have seen that a couple of times, where a mother will not sign the divorce papers because maybe they are a family inheritance, or for some strange reason, there's a conflict there. And it's much of a reality that a lot of people don't like to go into unless you've experienced it personally or have seen it from an outside perspective. I'm very fortunate myself to have both very loving parents in their own way, and they never really had the inkling of being together for the sake of the, quote, children. Never happened. So, thank God. I think they did for a while, but that kind of deteriorated quickly, but we'll get into that later. Children afraid to talk with or within or outside the family about what is happening at home, or are otherwise fearful of their parents. Children should not be afraid of their parents. Like 100% of the time, they should not be afraid of their parents. If they are, of any, case-by-case basis, that means there's a dysfunction there for one reason or another. Abnormal sexual behavior such as adultery, promiscuity, or incest. That's a whole can of worms that we'll probably get into later. A lack of time spent together, especially in in recreational activities or social events. We never do anything as a family. If you hear that a lot, we never do anything as a family, there is a dynamic there. And we'll get into that when we do some solutions to a dysfunctional relationship with their family. Family members, including children who disown each other or refuse to be seen together in public. Oh my God, man, that's a huge one. Specific examples. So these are a very much case-by-case basis due to outside circumstances. families with older parents or immigrant parents who cannot cope with changing times or a different culture. A parent of the same sex never intercedes in father-daughter or mother-son relationship on behalf of the child. Children who do not have contact with the extended family of their mother or father due to dishonesty, disagreement, prejudice, feuding, etc. I have a specific example with this. Obviously, I'm an adult, so this does not affect me as much as it maybe should, but my father's sister and her husband, my aunt and my uncle and my dad, do not get along very well. They haven't talked to each other in 10 years. And in that case, there is a dysfunction in that family dynamic, because I've missed a lot of events because of a request from the other side stating that they do not want to associate with my father and direct people within that line. So my father's girlfriend, my brother, or myself. And it is childish. Trust me, it is very childish that one side, the other side doesn't care. My dad is more than happy to be in the same room, to be in the same atmosphere as my uncle and my aunt. But it's just that other side. A family with one or more rebellious child with whom parents are, chronically angry, wherein non-religious children have to walk on eggshells to avoid spillover effects of parents' anger. This one is enormously complicated, especially right now given the current cultural state. And there was this same problem back in the 1980s, which I think is kind of an interesting thing because of what is now culturally good. And I'm putting that in quotes because there's always waves of, blank and blank, blank and blank, and they will always conflict. I don't think there will ever be a generation with a generation that does not get along based out of any kind of essential fear. An intense rift extending beyond mere disagreement of opinion to personal animosity between family members regarding ideology, children's disagreement with their parents' religious beliefs, once again, a family member having an abortion while other family members sharply object, family who support their country being at war while children do not. Being a younger child in 2004, 2002, when, the war in Afghanistan was such a huge hot topic, even now, I do know that I have a couple of friends who do get in disagreements with their parents because they're like, well, maybe we shouldn't have gone to war back then, but the parents were in agreement with us going to war. And, 78% of the country in the United States anyway, at that time, wanted to go to war. So it's like, well, where do you go from there? Ideology is such a complicated aspect of what is, of a lot of rift, religion. Obviously, there are religious parents, and then there are children who may oppose those religious beliefs because of outside circumstances, and the parents just cannot, cope in their mind that their child is not going to be your, in my instance, church-going, God-fearing Bible thumpers. Now, obviously, that is a dramatic over-exaggeration of what I mean, but obviously there is that separation there. Now, these are just a couple of examples of what it is, what can arise from a dysfunction. There are a lot of it. There's still alcoholism, dependence of responsibility, guilt, feeling, guilty, feeling like you should have stood up for yourself there, and it's just a lot going on. Family diseases and, workaholics, and there's so much there. There's so much going on. There are so many traits. There are so many things, and it's scary. So parenting, if you are a parent in if you see a spouse or if you see a family member showing any of these traits when communicating with their children, there could be a dysfunction either arising there or, that could happen. Unrealistic expectations, ridicule, conditional love, there's a big difference there, disrespect, especially contempt, emotional intolerance, so family members not allowing to express the wrong emotion, social dysfunction or isolation, stifled speech, so children not allowed to dissent or question authority, denial of an inner life, so children not allowed to develop their own value system, being under or overprotective, so it does go both ways there, apathy, so I don't care, belittling, you cannot do anything right, shame on you, bitterness, regarding what is said using a bitter tone of voice, hypocrisy, do as I say, not as I do, judgmental statement or demonization. As an example, you are a liar. Lack of forgiveness for minor misdeeds or accidents. Either little or excessive criticism. Experts say that 80 to 90% praise and 10 to 20% constructive criticism is the most healthy. And we'll talk about constructive criticism here in a bit. Double standards for giving mixed messages or having a dual system of values, i.e., one set for the outside world, another one is private, or teaching divergent values to each child, so teaching one to one, one to another. Unfulfilled projects, activities, and promises that affect children. We'll do it later. Gender prejudice. Treat one gender of a family member fairly and the other not. Man, I really did put a lot in this list. I won't go through all the know-it-all, I know everything, blah, blah, blah. Dysfunctional styles. So children as pawns. One common dysfunctional parental behavior is a parent's manipulation of a child in order to achieve an outcome adverse to the other parent's rights or interests. So using them to get what you want. And it was really funny in my dynamic as I was kind of doing my research and putting this into perspective. All right, we're going to start out with dysfunctional styles. Dysfunctional styles as a parent. Children being used as pawns. One common dysfunctional parental behavior is a parent's manipulation of a child in order to achieve some outcome adverse to the other parent's rights or interests. Examples including verbal manipulation such as spreading gossip about the other parent, communicating with the parent through the child, and in process exposing the child to the risks of the other parent's displeasure with that communication rather than doing so directly, trying to obtain information through the child or causing the child to dislike the other parent, blah, 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 blah. Now, there are maybe not... Using children as pawns is a very specific example, and it's a style that I think is disgusting. When I actually saw that, my mind was blown because I'm like, man, there are some times when I feel like my parents have been divorced for years and years and years. And no matter what, they can try to do something like this, and it just doesn't work. It won't work for myself or my brother because we are individuals and we don't dislike our parents. List of other dysfunctional styles. Using, destructively narcissistic parents who rule by fear and conditional love. Abusing, parents who use physical violence or emotional or sexual abuse to their children. Perfectionists, order, prestige, power, or perfect appearance when while preventing their child from failing at anything dogmatic or cult-like. Harsh or inflexible discipline with children's not allowed, without reason or dissent, questioning authority or developing their own value system. Abandonment. I don't think I really need to do anything with that because I feel like explaining abandonment might be obtuse. Abuse among siblings. Parents fail to intervene when a sibling is physically or sexually abusing another sibling. Excuse me. Helicopter parenting. Parents who micromanage their children's lives or relationships among siblings, especially minor conflicts. There are parents who care and they might say something, but the helicopter parents are very involved, like abnormally involved, I should say. It's taboo. Parents rebuff any questions children might have about sexuality, pregnancy, romance, puberty, certain areas of human anatomy, nudity, etc. So saying, "Oh, don't talk about that, it's taboo." The politician, a parent who repeatedly makes and agrees to children's promises while having little to no intention of keeping them. That is the politician. That's just a general commonality word, not anything else outside of that. The paranoid parent, a parent who having persistent or irrational fear accompanying by anger or false accusations that their children is up to no good, or others that are plotting harm against them. Once again, all of these are just dysfunctional styles and things that come out of it. A dysfunctional relationship is such an incredibly complex thing. Such an incredibly complex thing. I do recommend doing your own research too. So the effects on children resulting in this, joining a cult, or to find acceptance that they never had at home, or at a minimum having a differing psychological or religious beliefs for what they were previously taught, so totally rebelling against it even if it's harmful to them. They might be at risk of self-harm or suicide, becoming a sex offender, possibly including pedophilia, having difficulty forming healthy relationships with their peer groups, or being shy, outside of maybe even just a general mental disorder. Becoming addicted to drugs, including cigarettes or alcohol, especially if parents or friends have done the same. Being in denial regarding the severity of the family situation, and it's just a laundry list of different things. Now, not every family is going to have the same solution for maybe even having any of these dysfunctions. Your style, like I said, go to a therapist or go to a family counselor, because they will at least have they will have a deeper understanding of your personal dynamic, but then also they'll be able to give you the best advice to help, because each one is different. With all of the things that I have said and what I've done in my research, one of the biggest things that I have seen that could help with everything is listening and communicating. You must listen to your children, and children, please listen to your parents. Obviously, don't blindly say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, but understand why they're telling you to do certain things and make your own things. And parents, let your children be their own individual. They must be themselves, because if you don't, there is going to be a dysfunction, there's going to be pushback. At the end of the day, we are individuals. Myself and my brother, for instance, we are drastically different. He's an intellectual, I'm an artist. I love creating content. He's very much a numbers guy. Does that mean and both of our parents understand this, and they understand that we are not the same person, and we're not the same person as our parents. Don't tell them to be that person. They have to be themselves. Also, communicate with your spouse, even if you're divorced. Communication, understanding what's happening in that dynamic, and coming to an understanding is important. This does not mean stay together for the sake of the children. That is simply going to hurt them more than it's going to help them. If you still have contact with that individual, if you have still contact with the other parent of your child, make sure you come to this understanding. Don't put yourself in danger. And if you don't want to, just understand that you got to be understanding to your children. There's a lot of dynamics that make sure that a dysfunctional family dynamic does not happen. And it's so complex. There's so many, nooks and crannies to go into. So it's hard. But at the end of the day, listen and communicate. Do activities together if it's possible. Maybe inquire with other authority figures like a teacher or a psychologist with that child, and really kind of understand maybe what's happening, because understanding what's happening maybe give you the conclusion of why it's happening. So there's that. But my number one thing at the end of the day, for a dysfunctional relationship with family members is see a psychologist. And if you can, and I know it's sometimes hard to do, but if they are just not going to budge, they're not going to do anything, your happiness comes first, and it should always come first. Do not associate yourself with negative family members, even if you've tried every avenue, if you have exhausted every option to try to come to some sort of understanding. Separate, totally disconnect. And I know that's totally contradictory to what I've said, but when you have exhausted everything and it will not happen, and you feel like in your heart it won't, why associate? It just doesn't make sense. And I know it's hard, and I'm fully aware that it's incredibly difficult to disconnect from something like this. It's just hard to do it for friends, let alone a family member. But at the end of the day, your happiness matters, number one. And I do want to thank you for listening to my incredibly long rant. If you did enjoy, remember to like, subscribe, and share. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.